My name is Abigail Lawrence, and I am 35 years old. I was born the eldest daughter of a wealthy family in Boston's prestigious Beacon Hill neighborhood, a place where cobblestone streets curve between centuries-old brick townhouses and gas lamps glow faintly against the night air. From our windows, the Charles River stretched out like a silver ribbon. Ours was a family of tradition, reputation, and expectation, three words that defined my childhood. I graduated from Harvard Business School, the path laid out for me since the moment I could hold a pencil. Yet, after graduation, when my peers scattered into the gilded towers of Wall Street and consulting firms, I veered sharply from the road my family had prepared. I chose something quieter, less glamorous, yet far more meaningful to me: charitable work. For 10 years, I devoted myself to causes my family considered beneath us, running homeless shelters, teaching literacy classes, supporting children's education programs in underfunded neighborhoods. I wore no designer gowns, attended no society balls. My life was simple: cotton blouses, second-hand coats, and shoes bought for practicality, not prestige. I did not crave attention, perhaps because I had grown up watching my parents demand it relentlessly, their voices always louder than mine. My father, William Lawrence, built his name as the head of an investment advisory firm. He lived in his tailored Brooks Brothers suits as though they were armor, carrying the family name like a flag. At the Harvard Club, he dined weekly with clients, sipping scotch while quoting the phrase that had become his creed: "Uphold the Lawrence family tradition." To him, my choice to work among the city's forgotten was a betrayal. When I first told him of my plans, he refused to speak to me for a week. He said I had tarnished our name, a family disgrace. My mother, Martha, played her role as Boston society's ornamental flower with impeccable devotion. Clad in Chanel, Hermes, or Oscar de la Renta, she glided from gala to gala, bridge party to bridge party, rarely missing an opportunity to be photographed in the Boston Globe's society pages. Her charity was performative, a ribbon cutting here, a photo op there. For her, philanthropy was currency, traded for invitations and status. At home, she echoed my father's opinions without hesitation. If William disapproved of me, so did she. And then there was Caroline, my younger sister, the embodiment of everything my parents celebrated. At 28, she was already a vice president at an investment bank. Her life was an endless carousel of brand launches, yacht club weekends, and carefully staged Instagram posts to her 100,000 followers. They called her Boston's flower. She was the star, I was the shadow. 2 months ago, in our reception room lined with heavy burgundy curtains and dominated by an antique fireplace, the four of us gathered for what was supposed to be a family meeting. I spoke of expanding my charitable programs. I wanted to secure more funding, extend services to other cities. My father dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Another wasteful endeavor," he said coldly. My mother sighed dramatically. "How long will you keep this up, Abigail?" Caroline laughed, crossing her legs in her designer heels. "You'll lose followers if you keep pretending to be a saint." Their words cut deeper than they knew. I sat in silence, sipping tea gone cold, feeling the familiar weight of isolation pressing in on me. What none of them realized was that I carried a secret that had been carefully guarded, concealed even in the face of their contempt. For 2 years, I had been in quiet discussions with executives and board members. My 10 years of charitable work had not been a diversion but a deliberate apprenticeship. I had studied leadership in the rawest of forms, not in glass towers, but in kitchens, shelters, and classrooms. My appointment as president of Ritz Luxury Hotels had already been decided. The official announcement was scheduled for 1 week after my sister's wedding. There were reasons for the secrecy. The board feared stock fluctuations. They needed time to prepare for the shock of appointing a young woman to such a role in an industry still dominated by older men. My family had to be protected from the media frenzy that would follow. Above all, the transition had to be smooth, measured, precise. So when I spoke of expanding charitable activities, it was not a lie, but a veil. And while my family dismissed me as irrelevant, I endured, waiting for the moment the veil would be lifted. Now, that moment was fast approaching. Caroline's wedding was set to be a spectacle, a $500,000 ceremony at the Ritz Hotel, 300 guests, an orchestra, champagne towers, and gowns worth more than most people's homes. Her fiancé, James Wilson, was a Princeton graduate and an investment bank executive from one of New York's most respected families, skilled in tennis and golf, effortlessly polished. He was the perfect match in my parents' eyes. My mother rejoiced daily, calling it the perfect wedding. My father bragged about his future son-in-law at every business dinner. In me, I was relegated to the role of unpaid help. My responsibilities included confirming seating charts, checking floral arrangements, and coordinating with catering staff. To my family, I was nothing more than an event coordinator. What they did not know, what no one yet knew, was that the building in which this lavish ceremony was to be held would, in less than a week, be mine to command. On the morning of the wedding, I arrived at the Ritz earlier than anyone else. The air outside was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of the Charles River. The hotel loomed before me, its stone facade timeless, the symbol of a century of wealth and hospitality. The doorman, in his immaculate uniform, opened the door and bowed slightly. "Good morning, Miss Lawrence." His voice carried a tone of respect not yet meant to be spoken aloud. He knew. He was one of the staff bound by confidentiality, aware that in a matter of days I would be his employer. Inside, the grand chandelier spilled prisms of morning sunlight across the marble floor, still faintly smelling of last night's polish. In the banquet hall, staff bustled with quiet efficiency, arranging flowers, aligning cutlery, checking sound systems. When they noticed me, they paused briefly, then quickly returned to work. Their glances betrayed their thoughts. They knew my secret. But today I was not their president. Today, I was a sister, a daughter, a supposed disgrace, and the silent heart of an unfolding storm. "Shift the reception flowers slightly to the left," I instructed gently. "Confirm catering details with the head chef once more. Recheck the seating chart for printing errors." They obeyed swiftly, their professionalism flawless, but in their eyes I caught fleeting sparks of something warmer: respect, loyalty, anticipation. At 10 o'clock a.m., my sister arrived at the bridal suite. She swept into the room in a Vera Wang gown so pristine it seemed to glow. Mother was already there, her makeup perfect, wrapped in lilac Oscar de la Renta. I stood nearby in my simple navy Brooks Brothers suit. The three of us together, reflected in the mirror, looked like strangers from three separate worlds. Caroline barely glanced at me before ordering sharply, "Abigail, could you have someone bring tea for the makeup artist?" I nodded quietly, hiding the faintest smile. For now, she saw me as nothing more than her errand girl. But before the day ended, the world would see me as something entirely different. The makeup artist's expression turned apologetic at my mother's words, her hands momentarily pausing as though uncertain whether to continue with the contouring brush. "And I don't like this bouquet arrangement. Could you have it all redone?" my mother added, her voice sharp but dripping with an elegance carefully practiced over years of Boston soirees. The bouquet, a delicate arrangement of orchids, roses, and lilies, tied with white silk, was exquisite to my eyes, but to her, nothing was ever enough. My sister gave me a condescending look through the mirror, her lips curling into a smirk that needed no words. She enjoyed these small humiliations, and she made sure I noticed. By 11 o'clock, the tide of guests had begun to roll in. The lobby swelled with movement, Chanel tweed brushing against Hermes scarves, Gucci loafers clicking on polished marble. Voices rose in cultivated laughter. A congressman shook hands with a shipping magnate. A media mogul embraced a judge's wife. 100 years of Boston society seemed to materialize in the Ritz that morning, as if answering an unspoken summons. Reporters lined the entrance, their cameras flashing like the first drops of a summer storm. Photographers angled for the best shots of jewels, gowns, and carefully composed smiles. Every click of the shutter reminded me that I was invisible, just another shadow moving quietly between arrangements and staff instructions. Father, standing tall in his tailored Brooks Brothers suit, greeted the guests with the warmth of a man whose social standing was on full display. Each handshake was another confirmation of his place in the hierarchy. He made a point of introducing Caroline, his brilliant younger daughter, and James, his soon-to-be son-in-law, while brushing past me as though I were a passing hotel employee. "Ah, yes, Abigail is helping with the arrangements," he told one particularly distinguished senator. almost laughing, as if my role were a harmless quirk, a family joke that did not merit explanation. Mother directed me toward the staff table, lowering her voice so only I could hear, "Don't embarrass us today." Her gloved hand pressed lightly on my arm, not in affection but in command. Her smile remained flawless for the onlookers, but the edge in her tone was unmistakable. Caroline was radiant in her wedding gown, but more radiant still in her self-satisfaction. Between compliments from bridesmaids and the flash of cameras, she continued taking selfies, uploading them to social media in rapid succession. #perfect-day, I overheard her mutter, before barking an order at a waiter who had failed to hold her champagne glass at the correct angle. By noon, the air was heavy with perfume, laughter, and the rustling of silk dresses. The ceremony was about to begin. The chapel glowed under shafts of light from tall arched windows. The vaulted ceiling made every whisper sound like a prayer. 300 guests sat in rows of white cushioned chairs, their murmurs blending with the deep, solemn tones of the pipe organ. I lingered near the staff entrance, hidden in the margins of the celebration, waiting. And then I saw him. Former President Hamilton. At 70, his frame was lean but unbent, his posture so precise it made men half his age look careless. His gray Brooks Brothers suit, pressed to perfection, reflected both tradition and quiet dignity. His gold-rimmed glasses caught the light as he turned his head, and his eyes met mine. For a moment, I saw it, the fire banked beneath his calm expression, a flicker of anger, not for himself, but for me, anger at the sight of a woman treated as a servant at her own sister's wedding. He began to step toward me, his lips parting, but I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. His brow softened, and he nodded, retreating silently to his seat. One of the servers, watching us, caught my eye and allowed herself the faintest smile. She knew, they all knew, and their anticipation hummed beneath the surface like an invisible current, ready to erupt at the right moment. The violin began, silencing the room. Guests turned as one, their gazes fixed on Caroline. She entered, her hand resting delicately on father's arm, her face painted with the serenity of someone who had never known struggle. Every step down that aisle was measured, perfect, like the life she believed awaited her. The ceremony concluded in flawless order. Applause swelled as vows were spoken, and by the time the reception began, the air was thick with champagne bubbles, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. I sat at the staff table, the scent of prime rib roast mingling with the faint bitterness in my throat. The crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, casting dazzling reflections across a sea of gowns and tuxedos. My parents sat at the main table, glowing with pride, while my sister leaned into James, already planning her next social media post. And then Hamilton rose. In his navy suit and modest red tie, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to commanding attention without raising his voice. He approached the podium, his movements unhurried, deliberate. The chatter dwindled, then stopped entirely. "Jim," he began, addressing James's father, and distinguished guests. The warmth in his voice spread through the hall, soothing, familiar, a reminder of his decades as a leader. "My friendship with Jim Wilson spans more than 50 years, our college days at Harvard, our long walks by the Charles, the countless memories at this very Ritz." The crowd smiled, leaning into nostalgia. My parents exchanged looks of satisfaction, certain that their daughter's wedding had reached its pinnacle of prestige. Caroline beamed, her phone discreetly angled for another perfect shot. "But this hotel," Hamilton continued, "is more than a building. It is a living witness, a keeper of stories, a vessel of tradition, and like all great institutions, it must adapt, transform, and embrace new voices." The subtle shift in his tone pricked the air. Conversation stilled. A murmur passed through the audience. "For 2 years, we searched for the right person to lead this transformation, someone young, yet wise, someone rooted in compassion, yet unafraid of innovation, someone who could balance tradition with the demands of a new age." Father stiffened, his hand tightening around his whiskey glass. Mother's fan wavered in midair. Caroline barely noticed, absorbed in adjusting the lighting for her next photo. "And that person," Hamilton declared, his eyes sweeping the hall, "is here among us today." A stillness fell, deeper than silence. For months, This decision has been kept confidential, for the sake of the stock market, for the protection of families, and for a smooth transition of power. But today, in this historic hotel, it is time to reveal the truth. His voice rang out, unshakable. Ms. Abigail Lawrence. The clink of father's glass against the table was louder than expected. Mother's fan froze mid-wave. Caroline's phone slipped from her hands, landing with a sharp crack against the china plate. Please come forward. 300 faces turned to me, all at once. I rose, my legs heavy yet steady, and walked toward the podium. The staff, my silent allies, gave me the smallest of nods, pushing me forward with invisible strength. She, Hamilton announced, his hand extended toward me, is the new president of Ritz Luxury Hotels. The gasp that followed was like a tide, sweeping through the hall.